Sorry. It's only because I'm new. Okay, so I want to talk about building crypto wallets, focusing on the key management side, but very much related to the usability. I'm going to talk about MPC, but I really want to discuss or explain how it helps us solve what I think is one of the biggest problems with crypto wallets today, from a usability perspective, actually. And I also want to talk about some of the subtleties and dangers that are involved in trying to deploy an MPC-based wallet. I'm used to close to 2 decades of nobody knowing what MPC is and nobody caring what MPC is, if we want to add that in. And it's sort of a bit of a shock to my system to get used to a world where MPC is a buzzword, and I was talking about MPC, and yeah, I can download this open source project and now I'm done, and you see people doing horrible things. So I'm here to both explain how it's an extremely powerful tool, but how one still has to be very careful with it. It's not a ubiquitous off-the-shelf technology that's ready for someone with no expertise whatsoever to use. And I'm not saying that because I want consulting jobs, because I'm not available at the moment, but I have great students who maybe would be able to. Okay, so I want to talk about the self-custody dilemma, and I guess especially if this is the Web3 community, everybody's saying, yeah, of course, self-custody, Coinbase exchange, God forbid. But I'll get to that in a moment. I'm not going to completely, this is recorded and my listen, but Coinbase also has self-custody. So the technical solution is very simple. The user holds their key on their mobile, on their hardware device, on their laptop. They hold their key, and there are many advantages to this. It's your keys, your coins, and not just as a philosophical standing point, but also really the fundamental idea of decentralization. I need to control my keys to be able to carry out operations that only I want to carry out, to ensure that I can't be censored by a central organization. We all know that if I put my keys in an organization that is regulated and there happens to be a subpoena against me, then I will be censored. Personally, I'm not too worried about that because I'm not a criminal, but censorship can happen certainly in many countries of the world, not because you're carrying out, not because you're a criminal. I think more relevant for most of us, or most of the Western world at least, is they're not reliant on an organization that may go bankrupt. And I can talk about that a lot, but there's really no need whatsoever. There are some other things that are really not aligned with a centralized exchange, and these are things like NFTs. You can, of course, solve that as well, but typically centralized exchanges have pools of funds, and certainly for an NFT that makes no sense. What are the disadvantages of self-custody? I think this is the biggest one, and that is you're responsible. With power comes responsibility, and I always say there's only one thing worse than someone stealing all of your money, and that's you losing all of your money. That's much, much worse. And so what do? We have this mnemonic that we need to back up and store somewhere, and when it's worth $100, not a big deal. When it's worth $1 million, then let's think, how exactly am I going to back this up? How am I going to make sure that I don't lose it? And how am I going to make sure that it doesn't get stolen? And the problem is these things actually contradict each other. The fear of being lost is completely at odds with the fear of being stolen. Because the best way to make sure it's not lost is to replicate in many, many places. And when I replicate in many, many places, I make it easier to steal. And if I want to back up online in a cloud, well, great idea, but if it's worth $1 million, maybe not. So this is, I think, a huge problem. And when we think about bringing crypto to the masses, I think this is one of the biggest problems. If we can't make it really easy for users to use, then it's not going to happen. This is, just think about what happens when a non-expert user wants to install a wallet. This is scary, right? Your secret backup phrase makes it easy to back up. It never discloses it. Anyone with this phrase can take your ether forever. And it makes me really feel really comfortable, warm inside. Here's, from another wallet, here's your recovery phase. Back up to iCloud, back up manually. Which should I choose? Do I understand the differences? Do I understand the trade-off? look at this, BIP 39.6 been ported, and then it does these things. We're not guaranteed it will always be supported. I mean, what the hell is going on? I understand if I lose my recovery phrase, I'll lose all of my crypto in my wallet. Like, you think about opening a bank account and having this experience, right? It's worse than opening a bank account in Israel. Here's what happens when you have, I think this is MetaMask or lots of potential scams. Oh no, this is Ledger, so this is from Ledger. All different scams of phishing and other attacks of getting people to input their mnemonic. It's actually a really, really problematic thing, and the fact that you have a mnemonic means you're open to social engineering. And social engineering attacks, we know, are extremely, extremely effective. So we can go to the other side and say, okay, fine, let's put our money in an exchange. And they'll hold the funds for you. The burden of management and security is on them. They're much better at security and backup than most people. And you can add other anti-fraud mechanisms there. You can get much, much better usability. You can do password reset. Do you know how many people call customer experience, customer support, asking to reset their password on their self-custody wallet, and being really surprised that, sorry, we can't. But if it's an exchange, I can. Very, very simple. Give them the usability that I'm really looking for. Disadvantages, though, not all exchanges are equal. Transparency in this part of the world is unfortunately not something that everybody has. It's not just decentralized, so to some extent people might say, why bother? I don't need to spend a long time on this slide, so I won't. This is an interesting one, by the way. Think about this. You may still owe taxes even if your money has completely disappeared because the place you put it and you earned a profit but didn't withdraw it is all lost. So that's actually pretty scary. But on the other hand, let's be just realistic for a second. An exchange is essentially a bank. You know why they don't call it a bank? Probably because if you call it a bank, then the regulator is going to come down and you're like, anything. But to some extent, it's a bank. And I think most people will put their money in Citibank and not in banks, in Sand Bank of the Bahamas. So there is some basic awareness and logic and responsibility we want people to have. But still, it's a huge problem today. So my argument is that if we want everyone to use cryptocurrency, we have to solve this problem. And what we want is to enable self-custody, but with the experience of an exchange. So I'd like to enable a user to reset their password. I'd like the responsibility and burden of management to, at least to a large extent, be on some organization that has a lot of experience doing that. But I want to have control of my keys so that they can't do operations without me. Okay? And a little secret, very often they want that as well. Being a custodian is not such a great thing. It's actually a lot of advantages to organizations to actually not be custodians as well. And I want to just comment on this self-custody versus exchange sort of dilemma or tension, and there are purists on all sides. Personally, I actually think that both of these have a legitimate place in the world. Yes, I want to have my wallet and I want to have money in my wallet, but I don't know if I want to put my entire life savings in my wallet and walk around with it. I think that there's a place to have funds in both types of organizations, but that's really not relevant so much to business. Okay, so I believe that MPC can be used to solve this self-custody dilemma and build a wallet that will give the user experience of an exchange with the properties of self-custody. Let's see how we can. So what is MPC? MPC is a subfield of cryptography. It's been researched since the late 80s. I started researching MPC in 1998. I thought I was late in the game. But you're saying that because you think, my God, how old is this guy? Yeah, I'm old, 52. But it's come a long way from there. But there are thousands of research papers on the topic. And until about a decade ago, maybe it was mainly theoretical, but now it's certainly something which has a huge applied research community, but is also very, very heavy into commercialization. And I'm saying all that because there is sometimes a concept or a thought that MPC is like a new thing, it's like a new kid on the block, can we trust it? So yes, it's new, maybe relatively new in the commercialization world, but it's something with very, very strong scientific foundations that we have a very deep understanding of. This is not some newfangled thing that we don't really understand yet. And the idea of MPC is to enable people to compute on private data without revealing it. So I would like to know if we're related, the two of us, but I don't want to give you my DNA because I don't trust you. You're sitting in the front, no one would ever trust you in the front. And so I'd like to somehow run a protocol that will check if our DNA is matching in a certain way that we're related, but without revealing my DNA to you and without you revealing a data to me or to anybody else. And you can do that with MPC. Amazing concept. Surprising you can even do it, but that's the beauty of cryptography. There are many things that are very surprising, like zero knowledge proofs and so on and so forth. What you need to think about, at least for this talk, is that MPC behaves like a black box, a trusted black box, where parties can provide input to this trusted entity via perfectly secure ideal channels. The entity will compute whatever the computation is and provide the output back, and they cannot be corrupted. But in actuality, there is no trusted entity, and we're just running a protocol between the participants. And as long as the guarantee on the corrupted parties is fulfilled, then we're fine. So if it's a two-party protocol for now, what that will mean is as long as at least one of them is honest, everything is fine. It's as if we have this trusted entity helping us. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so essentially with MPC, there are two main properties that we like to talk about. One is privacy, one is correctness. Privacy means that nothing beyond the output is learned. And correctness means that the correct result is actually computed, and I'll come back in a minute to why that is actually important or how that expresses itself in the context of a wallet. And these properties should be guaranteed even if some of the parties are malicious. What does that mean? It means that if I'm running a two-party protocol between my mobile and the server, even if the server has been completely broken into, and they're running malicious code, and they have all the information about the protocol and everything, there's a mathematical proof of security that you cannot learn anything, or you cannot break correctness, and so on and so forth. One caveat, of course, this assumes that there's no bug in the proof in the paper, okay? And secondly, it assumes that there's no bug in the code that implements the MPC, and that process is a non-trivial process which requires a lot of expertise and effort, but I'm not going to talk about that for now. Okay, so how do we use MPC in the context of keys, in the context of a wallet, and it's something that we call threshold signing as well. MPC classically talks about different parties with different inputs. So your DNA and my DNA. And in this context, we're looking at things slightly differently. And instead of having different outputs belonging to different parties, which may be private because of their personal information, we just take the secret key and we split it, share it into two pieces. I'm focusing on the two-party case, but this can be used beyond as well. So for example, we'll take the key K and we'll take two random values that sum to that key. So if the secret key is the number 100, it could be 23 and 77. All right, it could be 64 and 36. Obviously this will not be secure, the key is tiny, but we do this on the full key. And we put one share of that key on each device, and then we think of those shares as the private input. And since they're the private input, we want to be able to generate a signature without revealing the share to each other. That means that even if one of the parties is completely corrupted, they won't be able to learn anything about the other share of the key. Because that's the privacy property in this context. Even if one of the parties is corrupted and tries to break the protocol completely, they won't be able to learn anything but the signature we're supposed to learn. And because it's the cryptographic properties of the signature scheme, it doesn't reveal anything about the key. Otherwise, this entire world we should all be looking for other jobs very, very quickly. Because it's all based on the secure digital signatures. And the privacy guarantee then is that this sharing protects the key unless you manage to breach both of these devices. And correctness tells me that what I'm agreeing to sign on is actually what I'm signing on. Because you could think of a different attack. I don't need to steal your key. All I need to do is to sign on something that you didn't want to sign on. So you have $1 million protected by a key. You want to transfer $1,000 to your friend, and instead you ended up transferring $1 million to Yehuda. That is no problem. I didn't learn anything about the key, but that breaks correctness. So the MPC property of correctness guarantees that you're only signing on things that you actually approve and agree to sign. Okay, everyone's with me until now? But one thing I want to talk about, which is corruptions. When you think about corrupted parties, right? When I'm comparing my DNA to, well, what's your name?
Gil.
To Gil. So Gil, really, I don't trust. He's corrupted, obviously. We know because he's sitting in the front. But when I'm thinking about, an organization, Coinbase, for example, and me, my mobile, clearly I'm not corrupted and trying to steal money from myself. Or maybe I am, but then I'm really nuts. And I know there are nuts in this area, but I'm not that nuts. Right, so clearly that doesn't make sense. And also Coinbase or whatever organization, that there would be a really bad business model, right? That they're not trying to steal my key and steal my money, because then their whole business goes out the window. But this is similar to the sort of questions we ask when we think about, is it safe to put my data in AWS? I don't think that anybody thinks that Amazon as an organization is trying to steal my data, but there could be corrupted insiders. Or there could be a situation where someone breaches AWS and steals data, which of course does happen. The same thing here. We want to guarantee that even if someone corrupts my mobile, even if my kid downloaded a game to my mobile, which I would never let them do, but let's say I did let them do that, then if they downloaded a game to my mobile, which was malware, which could enable it to completely own my phone, sorry for that, able to completely own my phone, they still can't steal the key because the key isn't there. And likewise, if someone breaches Coinbase or whatever organization is running the other side of the MPC, someone breaches that organization, or there's an insider there, they won't be able to use the key because they don't have the key. Without the authorization from the mobile, they can't do anything. If you corrupted both at the same time, I won't explain exactly why at the same time, if you corrupted both at the same time, then yes, you could learn. But that's already a very extreme sort of situation. They're very, very different entities. There's huge separation between them. This is already something that is a risk that we can say is very, very low. Okay, so let's skip that for a second. So how is it possible to do MPC? I'm not going to talk about it now because I just don't think I have time. I thought I was speaking for 2.5 hours, but then they said there's some other speaker, so your problem. But if there's time at the end, I will show you. Okay, so we're talking about sharing the key. You had a question? No. We're talking about sharing a key between the user device and some service provider. And what are the basic properties that the MPC guarantees? Firstly, the service provider cannot transact without the user because they don't have the key. They have a share of the key, which is complete garbage by itself. Again, thinking about the number 100, I hold 36, you hold 64. Given 64 alone, you can't do anything. It just doesn't have, it actually provides you zero information about the key. So without collaboration from both of us, you can't do anything. Second, if someone breaks into my phone and there's malware there, they still can't steal my key. But I want to stress something really, really important. I don't need to steal your key to steal all of your money. And in fact, I'm not really interested in your key, I'm interested in your money. So if you have a key protecting $1 million, and I break into your phone, all I actually need to do is to initiate a transaction to the service provider to transfer $1 million. I don't actually need to steal your key for that. And if I can do that, then game's over. So what is all this MPC garbage anyway? What have I done by splitting the key and preventing you from stealing the key if you can initiate a transaction? So the answer is that there are a few answers to that. Firstly, there are ways of making it hard to initiate a transaction without approval of the user. For example, or at least on a high-end iPhone, for example, requiring biometric authorization to carry out the operation. Or maybe on a high-end Samsung, where you have a secure UI that's connected to the trusted execution environment, even showing you the transaction that you're going to approve before you do, so that you can make that hard to start with. The second thing is policies. Okay, so we all know when we, the first time we ever traveled overseas to some strange place and we try to purchase something, our credit card company warns us and tells us, you know, what's going on, what are you doing? There are some, that's a sort of a fraud type of thing, but that same sort of thing can be done with basic policies on your wallet. Or with the bank. I don't know about you, but with my bank, there's a certain amount that I can transfer every day. I can't carry out one transfer of $1 million. And as a user, I could define that my upper limit is $10,000 a day. So I have $1 million in my wallet. Even if there's malware on my phone, at most I can steal $10,000. $10,000 is a lot of money. If I have $20,000 on my phone, if I have $1 million on my phone, it's not so bad. So policies are very, very powerful. You can use them to limit instructions or transactions by amount, by time of day, you can allow lists and disallow lists, and all of these things you can have in policies. And this is a very powerful protective threshold. Let's go back to the beginning where I talked about the mnemonics problem. Now I have to back up a share. So what happens if I put that share in my iCloud? And maybe also in my Google Cloud. It's only one share. So if someone steals it, it's still only one share.
When you say share, you're referring to the mnemonic?
Share of the key. The key, whether it's a C that you derive, we'll talk about that later on, but think about, again, I have keys for, cryptographic keys for all of my, in fact, we don't want to build it that way, we want to build it with one backup, but you're going to back up a secret in a way that by itself it's meaningless without the share at the service provider.
Mm-hmm.
So this already means that you can feel less nervous about backing that up as long as the method from retrieving from backup is such that it requires authentication also of the service provider. So you essentially get a situation where you have a password reset type thing. So if I can convince the service provider that I'm really who I am, that I am who I am, then it makes it very hard. Someone has to break into my iCloud as well as impersonate me. Is that hard enough or not? And you can think about, well, maybe I'll split into more pieces and put in different places, but the burden is much, much less, and we can do it automatically. And that's what's really important. Because if you want most people to use a crypto wallet, then it has to be automatic. Backup has to be transparent to them. Okay, and we can do that because it's only one share and it's not nowhere near as dangerous. By the way, you can disagree with it anytime you feel like. I might shout at you, but you can do it.
And these two shares, they are back in place. I mean, they are back to the PC, the key provided, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where is the store? Or
where is each share stored?
No, not the share when they are back to be one key.
They're never back to be one key. The way MPC works is that you are able to compute without ever bringing it together. I know it sounds absurd, but if you believe in zero-knowledge proofs, there's no reason not to believe in it. Right? I mean, we can do amazing things, but okay, I can see that it's, without using a board here, but let's talk about one second RSA. RSA, encryption signing, is y to the power of d, y with the hash of the message, y to the power of d, mod, and forget the mod for a second. Y to the power of d, where d is a secret value. What happens if instead of me holding d, I hold d1 and you hold d2, so the d1 plus d2 equals d. Now, in order to sign, I compute y to the d1, and you compute...
For a plus b.
One second. No. When did we do it?
It's done in the black box.
Oh, I'll get to that in a second. How did we get to that? I'll get to that in a second. But if I compute y to the d1 and you compute y to the d2, then if you multiply those together, then you add in the exponent, and no one ever knew d. How do we generate it that way? We also have an MPC protocol to generate keys. The key is never whole at any time in the entire life cycle. Trust me. I have a breach over here I want to settle. It can be done.
One question, please. So you're trying to resolve that the fact you don't want an organization to control your money, custody. So you said, okay, banks are bad, we don't want them to hold it, but still organizations are good because we still want to have some control.
Okay, let me refine. I didn't say banks are bad. I don't want to get fired. Not that I work for a bank, but I don't want to get fired. No, I don't think. I think transparent public companies can be good if they're good. I think that putting your money in a trusted organization is not a bad thing. I said that we want that there are sort of three levels. One is full custody, and there are dangers with full custody. Maybe I trust your organization, but you go bankrupt.
Second is self.
I don't think BlockFi anybody thinks they're about organization, right? BlockFi, I think everybody had respect for them as a very, sort of good organization. They went bankrupt, so you lost your money. That's how it is self-custody, with full custody. The other extreme is self-custody, where I have full control, and even if that organization goes away, then I'm still okay. And then there's something in the middle, which is non-custodial, where I can't do it by myself and they can't do it by themselves.
But where is the actual, let's say, chain itself? For example, in those examples, like let's take Binance. So they have their own network, and I doubt if they will fall, the money will still be available. So that's another aspect, whether the wallet or the ledger itself will be available somewhere.
So,
it's not Bitcoin.
I certainly don't want to comment on Binance, but I think what we're talking about in principle is we have a blockchain.
A truly public blockchain.
We have a blockchain.
Okay,
and
another question.
I'm talking about my keys for my assets. Now those assets can be anywhere. What I'm talking about is actually completely agnostic to the type of asset and to the blockchain.
If I still lost my share of the seed, how will it help me?
Okay, I gotta get to backup. We still have to show how to do backup. So I will talk about it, it's really important, but I just want to state that when we talked about this full custody, self-custody, and this non-custodial, then what I've talked about now as a naive implementation will actually be this non-custodial in the middle, which means that indeed the organization can't do an operation without me, but I could be censored. Because if they get a subpoena not to allow Yehuda to carry out operations because he's been dealing drugs, thank you. Wow, service. You want to come again?
It's your share of the tea.
So if they get a subpoena not to allow me to carry out operations, not for a bad reason, for any other reason, whatever, then I can't carry out operations either. So that's somewhere in the middle, which is not necessarily enough. But I want to stress that if we're right about the bankruptcy scenario, this may be enough. Because if they don't own the funds, then it could be that even if they go bankrupt, these are my funds because they can't do anything with it anyway. But I'm not a lawyer, I'm far from a lawyer. I make fun of lawyers all the time. So if there are any lawyers in the crowd, if there are, it's okay, I think you're converting, so anyway.
But let's have another question.
Yeah.
We have now in high level, three entities that needs to be online at the same time. No, there is also the blockchain.
If the blockchain dies, then
so it's three entities if you are not operating the blockchain.
I'm considering the blockchain as a separate entity.
Let's say if it's Ethereum, you need Ethereum to work at the same time. You're the custodian and you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's a service provider. I think we can assume that the blockchain is alive.
And if
we don't trust the blockchain, then I certainly wouldn't put it there. So
there are some offline problems.
But actually, the blockchain is not a part of this operation.
Yeah, I know, but
No, I don't. No,
it's not.
I want to stress the MPC protocol is run between me and the service provider. At the end of that MPC process, we get a signature.
Okay.
That signature is then sent to the blockchain.
Okay.
It's a separate thing.
That's the deal.
That's the beauty of MPC, is that it behaves in exactly the same way as if you did a local signature. In terms of the external interface, nothing's changed. This is always good for security products, right? The best way to kill a security product is to come and say, I have a great solution for your security problems, just change everything the way you work. You know that now you're going bankrupt. Surely, don't invest in those ones. So here MPC behaves exactly like a local signature. The rest of the world, it doesn't make a difference to them if you sign locally with MetaMask, use your Ledger wallet, or use an MPC wallet. It looks exactly the same. Okay, so it's not a party to this protocol. Okay, so what operations do we need? Obviously, we need to sign. We also need to generate a key, because somebody was worried about the fact that, okay, that's great, but the key was exposed to the beginning. No, we actually generate the key in a distributed manner as well. And even though for signing, RSA is much nicer and easier than ECDSA, for key generation, ECDSA is much better, so I'm happy. Key generation RSA is a real pain. Schnorr is the best, so if anyone here can influence the world, let's throw away ECDSA and go Schnorr. We also do something called refresh. refreshes this idea that some of you might be thinking, okay, this is nice. So we split a key between my wallet and the service provider. But eventually, maybe someone will break into my wallet, and it might take months, and they'll get to the service provider as well, and then they've got everything. So what we can do is we can refresh the secret by, at periodic intervals, introducing additional randomness. How? We have this split of the key. We agree on a random value R, also using an MPC protocol. I add R to mine. You subtract R from yours. Obviously, we still sum to the same value, because when you add R and subtract R, haven't been in school for a long time, but we all know the values stay the same. But if someone steals K1 plus R and K2, they still get nothing, because R completely hides everything. So essentially, you have to breach these two organizations within that, or the mobile and that organization, within the same interval, making it, of course, much, much harder.
So R can be some, just a password you know, that you send.
No, we actually use an MPC protocol to choose to do coin tossing, which is to choose a random R that neither side can influence. The idea is even if one of the parties is corrupted, we don't want them to be able to influence. It doesn't matter that much. You could, it's not too bad if one side sends, but we don't want to do that. There are sort of reasons why I don't want you, I wouldn't want you to send me your share as the random.
Not the share, only the.
Yeah, but if you're corrupted, what if you're corrupted? Someone broke into your mobile. I don't want them to be able to
You will
do
never know. I'll need to input some password. That's a great solution if you hack to my phone. You still don't know my
Yeah,
password.
so this is like adding additional layers on top, and we certainly want to do that. This is what I mentioned also before about biometrics and authentication. You certainly want to add passcodes and other things on top of this, but that.
You have 10 minutes left. Well.
You had 10 minutes in the beginning of it. We'll see.
12 and a half, Lisa.
I'm not going to fight. You'll throw me. You'll drag me off when I'm finished. Okay, backup is also really, really important. I'm going to talk about that. And HD wallet support is also important, and we'll see if I can have time to talk about it. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So the obvious idea for backup is very simple. There's a share at the service provider. There's a share on the wallet. There's a backup key somewhere that we're, maybe is kept safe in some way. We'll talk about it in a moment. And each one just encrypts their share. I encrypt my share, and the service provider encrypts their share. And we can store these backup files, for example, very easily at the service provider, because they don't mean anything. And maybe the key I can store on my iCloud. So if I store the key to this backup on my iCloud, but both ciphertexts are at the service provider, this is a very, very safe solution. Even if someone gets into my iCloud, they don't have anything. Unless they break into, of course, into the service provider as well. So you can already start seeing how backup can be made automatic and quite easily.
Backups, you can check from the backups if you have an alarm, and you can check continuously for backup. If you can get the backup, you can get the R from the backups. If you are the R.
So the question is, how do you retrieve from backup? How do you convince the service provider that you are indeed the authorized individual? This is a much easier problem than, this is exactly the problem, by the way, of with your bank. I forgot my password to my bank, how do I get it back? The world is used to these types of solutions, and we have good solutions, we have bad solutions, by the way, we also have quite good solutions. We have 2FA, we have all different things that we can use, and we can make that harder or easier depending on how much money there is. It's a wallet of $1,000, maybe it's going to be different to a wallet of $10 million or $100 million. For those of you that are $100 million. Let me know who they are. Okay, but there's a big threat here. The threat here is what happens if one of the devices is corrupted, but all they want to do is screw me over, and they just write a garbage value to backup. How do you know that that didn't happen at key generation? And you could say, oh, but what's the game? We want a game theoretic. We want to have some, game theory incentive for things. It could be sabotage. It could be to make this service provider go bankrupt. It could be just because I'm a complete nutter. So we want to prevent this from happening. And publicly verified backup is actually a way of doing that It's essentially, it's so great that the world knows what zero knowledge is now, so I can say that. It's essentially, I encrypt and provide a zero knowledge proof that we encrypted the correct value. And you can do that extremely efficiently. So we can actually have this notion where we're backing up, we're encrypting something, and anybody can verify the backup is correct without accessing the backup decryption key. It's an extremely powerful notion and something that we certainly want to implement over here. No time to. Okay, so given these tools, we want to have two backups. The first backup is what we call the regular, easy-to-use backup. This is the backup that you use when your phone fell in the toilet, when your kid broke your phone, when you moved phones and the transfer didn't work because you prefer Android for some reason. There are all these different reasons why you maybe need to restore from backup. And in this case, you're going to use the service provider. They're going to help you. Because you have a key in your iCloud. They have the ciphertext. You're going to run some sort of protocol between you to end up with two shares, again, from scratch. And then you're going to be able to reconstruct your wallet, and everything is very, very simple. We want this to be easy because people lose their phones all the time. If you have 100 million customers, that's not a lot, right? If you think about masses, and think about 1 billion customers, you're going to have a lot of these. You want that to be simple. Okay, and we can do that with this solution very, very well. I described it already. So but we also want a second backup, maybe. And I'm saying maybe because I'm not sure that we always need this. It depends a bit on your philosophy, maybe, but we certainly may want this. So the second backup is for censorship freeness. What does that mean? I want to enable the user to get their key back, even if the service provider has stopped, will not participate in that process. Why won't they participate in the process? Maybe because I've been subpoenaed. Maybe because they went bankrupt and they went, not only did they go bankrupt, there's just no one there to help me. I don't want to make sure that I can get my keys back. That I want the full self-custody, not the non-custodial. Remember, there's custody, self-custody, and non-custodial. The censorship-resistant backup is needed to get me from the non-custodial to the full self-custody. So how can we do that? So here we are going to need some private encryption key in some secure environment. This can be maybe you have a UBHSM that you bought. Maybe it's a biometric, maybe it's in your secure enclave. And if you're thinking, one second, you said it's going to be simple, name on this person have a UBHSM, I don't know. But I want to stress this is the not regular, easy backup all the time. This is sort of like for the extreme case, or for the really, person who's really important to make sure they're in self-custody. Maybe that's the sort of person who it's easy to get a UBHSM, but everybody can certainly put it on their phone. I'm not a big fan of the phone, but there are advantages of what I'm going to say. Okay, so the service provider will encrypt their share under the public backup key that belongs to the user from the UBHSM or from their phone. And the user will also encrypt their share, and the backups will reside on the phone. And if the backup's on the phone, you may say, okay, what have you done? You haven't done anything, because now, if malware gets to the phone, I can get everything. First, note that the key was never exposed. Unlike if I take a regular wallet today, my key is going to be exposed when I generate it before I write it to backup. Secondly, you can add significant controls around using that key. Passcode, someone mentioned, and biometric, and I don't know what, on good high-end phones is actually quite a good solution. And then when you go over $100,000, maybe your wallet will pop up saying, you're a very serious user now. You probably know what you're doing. It's a good idea to buy a UBHSM. We're going to send you one in the mail. This is how you use it. Okay, so these things actually also work very well. Okay, so why does this all solve the mnemonic and self and usability problem? The backup is generated automatically. The user doesn't need to see anything whatsoever. This is true for both of the backups. You can apply policy and fraud mitigation mechanisms, which are really important for users. This is what we expect from our financial providers, from our banks, from our credit card companies. Why shouldn't we expect it from our wallet providers? Again, we want this to be usable, so we want to make sure we protect people. And how can we protect people? By, if if we see transactions that look fraudulent, we can actually prevent them, and we can using these systems, even if someone completely broke into their phone. And you can have restore from backup, which looks like a password reset, because that's the experience that the user has when they lose their phone. They have to have access to the iCloud and access to the service provider, and that's all. 2 minutes? What 4 minutes?
Yeah, and go until 7:30.
Ah, so he convinced you, huh?
They convinced us.
So we also want HD wallet support. Why do we want HD wallet support? So again, just to remind, what's an HD wallet? Maybe, do I need to explain what an HD
Yes.
wallet is? Yes. Okay, an HD wallet is, instead of generating each key separately, I have one random seed and I derive all of the keys from there. That's what all wallets using mnemonics do, because the mnemonic is just one mnemonic, but suddenly I have a key for Ethereum and for Bitcoin and for Algorand and for and so on and so forth. How do I do that? I derive them using cryptographic derivation methods. Okay. It's actually not essential to have an HD wallet when we're doing what we're doing, because backup is automatic. And if backup is automatic, then we can, every key we generate, we can just generate the key using MPC, and then we can back it up. So we don't absolutely have to have an HD wallet. But there are situations where going to backup maybe is harder, or we don't want to always have to go to backup. And people also want interoperability with other wallets. Very often, at least I always believed that in the company that and where I am now, that we want customers to be our customers because we provide the best service, not because we've locked them in. Because if you're locking someone in, the chances they're going to come to you in the first place is going to be lower. So we want also interoperability with other wallets, which are HD wallets. So can we build MPC HD wallets? This is what an HD wallet looks like. Here's a seed. This is the BIP32 standard. So you have HMAC SHA-512, which is the cryptographic function, pseudo-random function, what they call, and you can derive multiple different keys. It looks quite disgusting, but that's life. So can we build these BIP32 or BIP39 compliant wallets? And why do we want it? Well, again, it's very easy. It's such easy to sell standard methods. You can also, what happens when you want to import a wallet? There's one thing if someone begins their crypto journey with my beautiful, shiny MPC wallet. But what happens, he has a Bitcoin shirt, so he already has like $85,000, $385,000 in his wallet. He already has lots of keys. I underestimated from his face, I think. He has lots of keys all over the place, and they're all in this structure. And I say, yeah, come over to my wallet. He really wants to use my shiny MPC wallet. But the problem is that he has a single mnemonic that he can use to import, and I need to be able to derive from there. So the initial derivation I can indeed do, because the key already holds the key, so I can derive locally and then split and use MPC from then on. But what happens if my MPC wallet doesn't yet support this brand new blockchain called Refer a Friend? Just look at the sign behind me. That's a brand new blockchain that someone started, but his old wallet does, and he already has a key derived from that wallet. And then when I do support that blockchain, I'm going to need to derive an MPC in order to make sure that anything that he did on his other wallet is also on this wallet, because wallets aren't exclusive. It's not a monogamous relationship necessarily, right? I can have multiple wallets, and nobody's going to get too mad at me. So I need to be able to make sure that I'm supporting the exact standard. Also, export is much, much easier from fulfilling the standard. The answer is that yes, because in the late 80s, a beautiful theorem was proven that any probabilistic polynomial function can be computed in MPC. Fantastic. Unclear how efficient it is. The way we do this is we convert the function into a Boolean circuit, and we emulate the computation of a Boolean circuit in MPC. You're probably thinking this cannot be very efficient, but in fact, it's actually much more efficient than you think. We can do derivations, standard derivations in, depending on communication, milliseconds to low numbers of seconds. There is one problem, which is BIP39. Who's here from you with BIP39? One person. So BIP39 said, okay. The BIP32 says, how do you take a seed and generate all of these keys? That's the beautiful diagram I showed you before. BIP39 said, okay, 1 second, but I don't want to have a seed, I want to have a mnemonic. I'll go from a mnemonic to a seed. And here's the standard way of going from a mnemonic to a seed. And they said, we're going to hash it 2,048 times. Why? Any ideas why? who comes from this for legacy security world.
It takes a long time to crack.
Exactly, we slowed down password guessing. This is what we do for standard passwords. And it says here Yehuda's rant, so I have to, it's because in the slides. It makes no sense here whatsoever. Because in these wallets, you're not choosing the mnemonic yourself. It's given to you, it's full entropy, it's 128 bits at least. You cannot brute force that. And not only that, this is nice, slowing you down 2,000-fold is great when it's your password to Facebook and you're trying to brute force millions of passwords. If you have any reasonable amount of money in there and you're actually using a password that you can remember, a mnemonic that you can remember, nothing in the world is going to save you. And if you did 300,000 iterations, it wouldn't be enough. Okay, so
Maybe
this
quantum computing.
Oh, no, that's another rant. It's a different line. I don't have time for that. If quantum computing becomes relevant in my lifetime, then we'll have plenty of time to move over all of our blockchains. ECDSA is broken, so forget about hashing. Apart from that, symmetric encryption is only square root time, and hashing is only, these things remain secure, so we're fine. But this actually is completely not needed. The problem is that it completely screws up my MPC, because 2000, I can do 1 HMAC, or 4 HMACs, or 10 HMACs, but 2048 is going to give me a circuit of 476 million AND gates. I won't say why it's AND gates. It's going to cost me a communication of 14 gigabytes to upload from my phone. This is not happening in MPC. So BIP39 wallets, I'm sorry, you can import a BIP39, but we're not going to be generating BIP39 from mnemonic. And the fact is we don't need to, because mnemonics aren't relevant in that type of construction. If someone says, but I want to export a mnemonic to MetaMask afterwards, well, I'll let you export individual keys, and let MetaMask also support BIP32 directly out of the box. It's a tiny change. Okay, so these can be done. I don't want to go into all of this. Do I want to do this? I don't want to do all of this. I don't want to do all of this. I still don't want to do all of this. I still don't want to do all of this. Okay, are we done? There are still more challenges. EDDSA. So we know ECDSA, right? We know EDDSA. EDDSA and ECDSA have nothing to do with each other. EDDSA is a signing scheme called Schnorr. Do you know why it's called EDDSA? Because it's probably easier to convince people to use it because it sounds like ECDSA. It's Schnorr over the Edwards curve. Edwards ED25519, it's a specific elliptic curve, but it's a Schnorr signing algorithm. But that also has an element inside that uses SHA-512 in order to derive it from the initial value of the key, and it just makes my life hard because I don't know how many people are familiar with classic cryptography, but in the classic cryptography world, symmetric cryptography is really fast. So lookup tables and XORs and permutations, like this is, you know, AES and HMAC and SHA, these things are really efficient. And RSA and ECDSA are heavy because it's big number theoretic operations. For MPC, it's the opposite. Because what we love is algebraic structure. I talked about RSA before, and y to d1, y to 2, you can multiply together. Doing anything which has no structure, like the symmetric stuff, always requires these Boolean circuits. We can do it, but it's harder and it's more expensive, but we can do it. So that we can't do it, we can. And the only reason we need to do it anyway, why can't we just do Schnorr and ignore these hashing inside EDSA, is because if you want compatibility with other wallets as well, which at least the product managers always tell me that they want. I have to listen to them. So, and of course we have to build MPC for all of these things that I talked about before, and key derivation, key generation, signing, public key backup, and refresh. It can all be done, and that's it on the presentation. Yes?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my question is about the infrastructure for MPC wallets could be done by ourselves, so it's not necessary I need to rely for infrastructure of the third-party provider, right? So I could, for example, use some open source libraries or whatever, and to run, I don't know, several virtual machines, put the shards on these virtual machines. Let's say it's 4 virtual machines on AWS. Very next morning, I realize AWS shut down virtual machines, which is happening sometimes. How it works if several
Yeah, so firstly, anybody can use
Can you just
MPC.
repeat the question for the audience at home?
Yeah, so if I want to deploy an MPC solution by myself, firstly, I can do it, but I want to relate to that point as well. And secondly, so if I put 4 different machines on AWS, I'm not splitting between 2, I'm splitting between 4. Then what happens if AWS shuts down that service? How can I protect myself against these types of things? So firstly, anybody can deploy MPC. It's science, it's known to the world, it's public. It's like saying I can write a smart contract. Guys back there are laughing right now because they know I can't write a smart contract. If I did, it would be very, very bad. It requires expertise. Are there good enough open source libraries right now? My argument would be no. I hope that there will be soon. That may be a hint, it may not be. You can decide for yourself. But yes, certainly you can deploy. Also, you can buy software that someone and deploy it. The way we think about it is that first you need strong separation. So it's much better for machines on AWS, which are all protected by your account with your single password. Don't know if that's great, but if you and your colleague have different accounts and have them in different, then that's great. Maybe you have in different data centers as well in case there's a hurricane on the East Coast. Maybe you have one in AWS and one in Azure and one in GCP. That already starts sounding like much stronger separation. Maybe one in AWS, one in Azure, one in GCP, one in IBM Cloud, and you have an MPC protocol which requires only 3 or 4. And then you have that even if one of the clouds goes down, you're still alive and you can still run the MPC protocol. So it's a very flexible and powerful technology that enables you to do all of those things and get very good redundancy as well.
Thank you.
They want pizza.
Question, guys, before the pizza? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.